I'm super excited today because I am going to have a play with my latest designs that Funky Fossil have turned into stamps and also stencils as well. Couldn't think of the word then. Stencils as well. And these came out in October. It's the first time I've actually had a bit of chance to play with them, so I'm really can't wait to get stuck in. There are two stamp sets. So we've got this squirrel with beetles and various other bits and pieces. And then we've got this badger with leaves and sycamore and honest and catkins and all sorts of other stuff as well. And then also, if you look, one of the leaves, Sarah's very cleverly turned it into a stencil, but not just a stencil on its own. We've also got the overall shape and the cutout shape as well, so that's going to come in very useful. And yeah, so I'm going to play. What I thought I would do was to make a journal page with them. So I've already cut out some paper. This is some heavyweight paper. It's a mixed media paper. I'm going to be using some gouache paints. I've got a mix. I've got traditional gouache. I've got acrylic based gouache. I'm probably going to use my pencils. I've got some pencils here as well. And we'll see what else comes along as I work through. So what I wanted to do first was just put some colour down. So just going to put some colour down, get this started. I quite like using warm colours to get started with. And that's what I've been doing a lot of recently. So as this is gouache, it dries matte, which is perfect. I really like matte paints because I can use my pencils over the top, so that really sort of suits me quite nicely. I'm using a palette knife just to get the paint down. I don't want to put it on too thickly, just let's give it a good scrape up. You could also, use your brush. You could thin it out with water. The other thing about gouache is that it dries opaque. So if you want it to be more translucent, you'd have to add water, put it on really thinly. The difference between the two types that I've got here is just basically what kind of binder is being used. So the acrylic gouache is an acrylic binder, and that means that it will basically it should stay put. Once the acrylic paint, if you've used acrylic paint, once that is dry, it stays pretty put. And with the traditional one though, however, you can still rework it after it's dried. So I quite like that because that adds an extra level of fun. Actually, I don't want to go to the green just yet. I think I will carry on. Might add a bit of pink. And this is traditional, this particular one, this pink. So I mix and match them. I'm not worried too much about it. If I particularly don't want my layers to mix, then I will try and stick to acrylic. If I'm not bothered and I want the excitement and the risk of not knowing what's going to happen, then I will just use the traditional format. And yeah, I'm going to be quite splodgy with this, particularly on this level. And there's one thing I just want to check is I wanted to look at how much of the page I might want to cover. I don't think I'm going to completely cover the whole page, so just wanted to have a look, but I might put a little bit of colour down here to just a little bit. I quite like having the white of the paper or whatever the surface is that I'm using peeking through. But you know, if you don't, you can get it all covered up. I really liked how that went over the pink, so I might try and add a bit to here just to give a nice counterbalance. And that's my first colour layer, really. I'm going to let this dry before I move on to the next layer. Now this is dry, I wanted to actually do something with the stencil over the top. So I thought I would put in a little bit of stencil design using pencil. And yeah, I wanted to see how it would work. So let's have a go. And this might take a little bit of time and patience to do, but I just thought it would be nice. At this point, all I really want to do is add a bit of texture. And I think this would be a really great texture to add here. So I'm just going to very quickly put in some pencil colour. This is an indigo colour from Faber-Castell Polychromos, and I'm going to just put in little bits in this rather intricate pattern, and it would just be a way of adding a little bit more interest and intrigue to this layer. Could do this with ink, or could do this with paint, could do it with anything that you like to use your stencils with. So I thought I would go with pencil. Let's see how it works. So one thing about using pencil is that you have got the texture of the paint underneath to contribute to the surface as well, so things might be a bit rugged depending on how much texture you've got in your paint, and that might wear down the pencil itself. Let's have a quick look. And yeah, so we were already getting ahead, making some pattern. I just like this idea of I'm very much a doodler. I like to doodle. I like to doodle with pencil, with colour pencil particularly, and pen as well, but I think on a surface like this, pencil works quite well. Just going to put a little bit more detail in. We're going to build up these layers, so don't necessarily need a lot at this point, but I think I will put a little bit in. Just enjoy this texture, this interest that I'm putting in with this technique. Let's have a look at that. Okay, so I think I might move the stencil and put it somewhere else. So I might come down here and move my piece around as well. Of course, you can use different colours. You could try out different things. I've gone with a dark colour because I know I'm going to layer up over the top of this. Well, I think I'm going to layer up over the top of this. I'm not trying to pre-plan it, but I think that's the direction I'm going with it. And so I thought the darker colour would work well. Just be careful when you are doing a pencil between your thinner pieces of stencil, that you're not accidentally moving or twisting the stencil, or putting any extra pressure on it. You don't really want to do that. Now, I am being a bit quick, but you could take your time. A nice sharp pencil also helps, and don't try and force the pencil into any places that are too small for it. That is a way of breaking your stencil. If you do that, you don't really want to do that. So There we go. A couple of intriguing textures. Might put another one down here. Like the way this fans out. So that's why I've gone for this. It's a way of adding more interest in a different material. You might get a little bit of smearing when you layer over the top with paint over pencil. Even if it's not a water reactive pencil, these are not water reactive pencils. When you're doing this, you get little crumbs of pigment that go onto the surface. Let's see if we can get some off. You might not be able to see that, but you get these tiny little crumbs of flecks of the pigment, and that's what could maybe pick up and smear when if you're using paint over the top. Okay, so I want to put some more colours in, and I think I'm going to go now with a cool colour, set of colours, and again I'm going to be quite haphazard with it, just put them on quite liberally, and even if you end up covering up any marks that you've made, it doesn't really matter. What you want to be doing is just having fun, trying things out, seeing where it goes. Nothing has to be perfect. Just want to put some colour down. I love the way this tealy green works with these colours. So I might put a little bit here, but in a very flaky form. Oops. Accidentally peeled that up. But I actually like that because you can now see the pink coming through. I thought it was wet, but it wasn't. It was quite dry. So try not to make the same mistake again. And there you have it. A few layers down. And just, I kind of need this to dry as well, but I think maybe I'll put another layer down too with another colour. So this is a smalty blue, and let's do it in a different direction to what we've been doing so far. Right, okay, I'm going to let that dry now. So whilst I'm letting that dry, I think I will work on what I decided to do was, rather than stamping directly onto my piece of paper, which I could do, but I think what I'll actually do is do it as a collage element. So I want to put a little bit of colour down on this piece of paper, and I think I'm going to go for a little bit of pink. I'm just looking at my colours to see a little bit of pink. I think let some of that blue that's already on my palette knife come through as well. And I think that's all I really want. Just these two colours. Bit of white there too. Bit of texture. Keep it quite light. And then let that dry before I start to stamp on it. Let's have a look and see how much we've got covered. So yeah, I think that will do the trick. Right, so top layer for this, at least at the moment, I'm going to mix together a little bit of white. So this is a acrylic gouache with this light earthy yellow colour. Mix these two colours. Now I don't want to get it too wet because these cooler colours, and that pink actually, the blue, the green, the turquoise, No, wait a minute. Turquoise wasn't, was it? That was an acrylic. So the blue and the pink are both traditional style gouaches. So they are potentially going to mix. So I just have to be a little bit aware of that. Might not be an issue. I might enjoy the colour that they mix into. I just want to quieten down my background a little bit. So I'm just going to put in just a touch of colour over the top, just to knock it back a little bit. I want to do it in such a way that allows the texture to come through. So I'm not going to overwork it. I'm going to let the colours peek through. See what texture we get from it. And see what happens to that pencil mark. You can still see all of those textures and colours coming through, but just a little bit more subdued, which is how the knocking back works. And it's just a fun way of layering up colour and interest into a page or into a piece. You can do this with any kind of paint. Even if you don't have any gouache, you can still use your acrylic paints. So you can put it on thickly. The thicker you're going to put it on, the more coverage you're going to get, especially if you're using a gouache. If you're using a transparent colour or a translucent colour, say in your acrylics, then you'll get a different effect again. You'll get more of a glaze, but that can be fun to play with too. So there we go. We've got some texture. You can still see the pencil work coming through. Might put a little of the stronger colour down as well. I like using dry brush as well, so you can use that as a way of allowing the colour underneath coming through. I'm going to set that to one side, let that dry whilst I stamp out my image. Now it's actually been quite a while since I did any stamping. So this should be an interesting flashback. I am going to set up a piece of paper. I think I'll line up how I want the badger. Put the badger there. And I couldn't find my black ink. I don't know where it is. So I'm actually going to use grey. So this might take me a couple of passes, but that's the beauty of using one of these tools. I want to make sure I've got a good amount of ink on the image. My ink is also a little bit old as well, so I don't know what's going to happen there. Let's have a look and see how this works. So let's have a look. Ah, there we go. That's actually worked perfectly. I think the grey works really well because something else I wanted to do for this. Got to be careful because the ink is still wet. And what I wanted to do, at least to try, was maybe use a little bit of pencil work to add a little bit of detail. So just in a few places. I'm quite liking the texture of how the ink is drying over that gouache paint. I really like that. So I might not do too much. Well, let's have a look and see. Now I don't want to smear it. What I thought was I'll just darken it a little bit in areas using some pencil. see how that would work. Being very careful not to accidentally smear my line. It's gliding a little bit over the paint. It works nicely on the paper. It's moving the ink as well, which is interesting. I probably won't do a lot. Add just a little bit more interest, to add a little bit more intrigue to the way it looks, just to add something different rather than just one colour outline. I think the paint also does a really good job of adding texture. Of course, you could do this with a pen as well. Wouldn't necessarily have to do it with just a pencil. Probably would do better if you did wait for everything to dry, but I'm always jumping ahead. I like how that works. Might put a bit more darkness here. Where that ink's dried, it's definitely easier to layer over the top. Can get a different dimension by just adding little touches of colour over the paint and ink, just adding a bit of emphasis in places. Here we are. Just wanted to change that look up a little bit, and then I'm going to cut that out. Here we go. There's our little badger. I've got some more coloured paper here, and I might try to stamp out the leaves, just fitting them in. The other thing I wanted to stamp out was the sycamore seeds. Another image I might use are these morel mushrooms that I've got on. This is the squirrel set, a grateful heart. And I thought what I would do is line it up so that the stalks are in the brown area. And just have that lined up like that. I've cut everything out. I've got all of the bits I've just stamped. I've got a nice kind of distressed look to them. I've got my background. I've also pulled out a few other bits and pieces that I've got. Some deli paper, just a little bit of packaging paper, and some painted paper, notebook paper. I've also got some of my download for my art club as well. So I thought I might just collect these things together and see how I can turn them into a finished piece. So I quite like the idea of this deli paper, and I really love how deli paper, it's got a bit of ink mark making on it. It's what you can see there, and just thought I would just have a little bit of a play, see what comes out, if anything, and just be very, just tear and be very open with it and very intuitive with it. The other thing I wanted to do is I might actually split the sycamore, because what I wanted was to turn them into wings. So pick the two that were on one side together, and then you've got like instant badger wings. So I thought that was quite cute. And there we go, instant badger wings. So that's going to be my badger. I think I might actually stick the badger and the wings together so that I can see them as a whole. So this is how I want the wings to look. So I'll stick those together. A little bit of glue. Get the wings where I want them to be. Just check before I finish them. Yeah, I think that will be perfect. The glue I'm using is actually an acrylic gel medium that I just put into a nozzle bottle. Could use some of the mushrooms. My fairy badger gets a little throne of mushrooms. And the leaves to add a bit of texture. Let's see what else. I'm wondering if I might just go for the deli paper to add that extra texture, and that will be it. I could put the leaves in a cluster. Oh, I quite like the cluster. That's a bit neater. I like that. I also like the fact there's 3 there and the 3 of the mushrooms. So I think that's the direction I'm going to go with it. And I'm going to put this in place. So I think I might just stick this down as it is at the bottom of my page. So get some glue on the back. Line it up at the bottom. Just check. Right. And if I press down now with a spare piece of paper, make sure I've smidged all that glue out, the lines just kind of disappear, which is quite fun. So makes it a lot easier. Put my badger back in place. My fairy king badger, or actually she's going to be a fairy queen badger. I think what I'm actually going to do is put a little bit of scribble writing texture down. So just a little bit to link these areas up a bit and add a bit more texture. So I'm just going to get my pencil and loosely do this kind of mark making, which I just absolutely love. Move the pieces out of the way as I work down the page. Now, I'm going to be just a bit careful here that I don't tear into this paper. There we go. Maybe a little bit on this side, just to connect that through. So I'm going to glue these in place. I like the fact that they're coming off into that white border. Stick the mushroom to the badger, and then the badger to the background. My fairy queen badger on her mushroom throne, with all the texture that's been built up using the colours, using layers, using paint and pencil. And we can still see some of that early pencil texture down as well. I'm quite glad that that didn't smear and smudge, but it's added a nice interest to the piece. So thanks for joining me with this journal page today, trying out my new stamps. You can get them from Funky Fossil, and yeah, I hope you have a lot of fun with them. Do share what you've been making with them, and I will catch up again with you soon. Bye.